guess. This presentation is very informal, so if you have any questions as I go or when I get through, either one, don't hesitate to interrupt me. You will have to speak up because I have to hear you over this blower motor if you want to be heard. My name's Dave Cummins. I graduated from the Art Center College of Design, then the Art Center School in Los Angeles, taking a major in transportation design and industrial design. This was back in the mid-50s, and then after that, I went to Chrysler Corporation in about February of 1957 and stayed there until 1989 when I retired, about 12, 13 years ago, and I've been retired ever since. I worked in styling and engineering, both, depending on which period of time you want to talk about. Started under Virgil Exner, and went all the way through the Elwood Engel era and on to Dick McAdam. Then the corporation had a disaster and about went under, period. We didn't even know whether they were going to cash our paychecks for a while in the 1980 era. But they did, and we survived to become a healthy corporation by the time I left in 1989. I went through a number of middle management positions. I spent 18 years as a chief designer in styling, and some of the significant programs I was involved with were the 1957 Valiant and Barracuda program. I went on through Volare, had a lot to do, well, did the essentially the 1969 Big C-Body program for the corporation, which was Chrysler and Imperial, and all of the facelifts up until 1973. I went into interiors and had all of corporate interiors. For a while I had Dodge Big Car, the Monaco, and Dodge Truck. Working on trucks is a lot of fun. Everybody stays out of your hair and just makes you think you know what you're doing, where they don't do that with cars. Everybody's an expert when it comes to cars. After that, we had our corporate disaster, and I decided to go into engineering rather than styling, and went to a group vice president friend of mine and said, Jack Withrow, I think I can do something for this corporation nobody else is willing to do and probably may not be able to do. I know a lot about styling. I know a fair amount about product planning, engineering, manufacturing, sales, all of that. I'd like to have the ability to go anywhere in the corporation and find out if there aren't ways that we can improve our product. We're making very crude products, and this was back in the 1980 era. The overseas guys were just giving us what for. Ford and General, well, not so much General Motors, but Ford was giving us a pretty hard time when it came to quality at that point. And I asked for the ability to visit all the international auto shows from Tokyo to Frankfurt to England, everywhere, to try and seek out during press preview days all of the advanced technology that the rest of the world was starting to get into, and make slide presentations. And I had about the steamer trunk full of literature available to anybody who wanted to come to presentations I held in our executive green room before I got through. Well, when I started doing that, it was a good cop-out for anybody that wanted to sleep through a slide presentation. But by the time I got through, I had group vice presidents asking me for personal presentations with all of their chief engineers, planners, so on. And it worked out to be quite good. And it's been really rewarding to read through some of the road reports on cars that have been done since I left. Almost, well, say a good number of them comment that the touchy-feelies and the fit and finish and all of that has improved a great deal. Of course, throughout the industry, but specifically at Chrysler, and I can pinpoint exactly where we started this movement or we started that movement to get things to work much better. Still got a long way to go. Okay, enough.
What year did you leave? What year did
I retired in October of '89. Okay, took early retirement. The minute I was 55, let me out. And it's been great fun ever since. So enough on the introduction. Unless there are any further questions, I'll go on into the presentation of the little Ford taper tail speedster that this program is all about. I'll preface it with a bit of a story. This is a saga. It won't help you much on modeling, but it's an interesting story about people and a particular special that is currently being built. It's not finished yet. Back in 1991, I drove in the California Mealy with a friend of mine from Crown Point, Indiana, who had a 4.5-liter Bentley, the same thing that was raced at Le Mans back in the 28, 29, 30, 31 era, and they won Le Mans. His car was hotted up a lot with 3 great big huge SU carburetors and about a 9-to-1 compression ratio. The stock was 2 carburetors, much smaller, and about a 4.5-to-1 compression, but this job would go right down the road at 100 miles an hour with no problem at all. We folded the windshield down flat, had a couple of Brooklyn screens up in front of us, and just raised hell all over California. It was great fun. At that meet, there was a guy that was around, he would have been his mid-70s by that time with his wife, and he was driving a 1931 Marmon V16, original right down to the pinstriping. He had talked his dad into buying this car as a demonstrator in 1932, direct from the Marmon dealers, and he's had it ever since. He ran in the California Mealy with his wife, beautiful lady. The guy's name is Jay Eitel. He's now 85 years old, and we're in the throes of doing the little taper tail speedster. I was particularly taken with his enthusiasm. He was just this far off the ground, 12 hours a day, just great. Wonderful person to talk to. His wife was highly supportive, and she was just having a grand time at this meet. And I said, well, you know, if you're ever in Detroit, because I know you go back there for the SAE all the time, every year, and he lives in Atherton, California, by the way, in the South San Francisco Bay Area. I said, look me up. Well, he did that a year later, and we started talking, and he said, well, he says, you know, he says, back when I was a young man in 1940, I built a little space frame. I was a race car driver. I used to drive a great deal on the dirt tracks back then. But he said, I wanted to design my own car, and I had a V860 that I had hotted up. And so I made a little tube space frame and mid-mounted the V860 in that space frame, and took essentially a home-built transaxle in the back, and then hung a 41 Ford transmission and an overdrive out in the back with swing axle rear suspension and a front leaf suspension. He says, I've never done anything with that because after I got through with that far, I had to raise a family, buy a house. I was 4F. I didn't go into the service, but I was providing valuable service during World War II for the war effort. And he said, I got a 37 Ford grill hanging up in the barn, and you should see his barn, complete with dynamometer and everything else, machine shop and the whole bit. But he says, I've always liked 37 Fords. Maybe someday I'll get somebody to design me a body. And the light bulb went on right away. I didn't say much. But I'll take this on with from this point on with sort of some pictures that'll help you visualize what happened. Our equipment, I'm primitive. The equipment is maybe primitive. You'll have to bear with me a little bit on this, but we'll do the best we can. Jay told me back in 1992, I believe, he said, here's the kind of thing I have in mind. This was his first sketch, okay?
It looks like mine.
But it does show the engine, the rear axle location, the tranny hung out back. It's headed this way, you know, and the fuel tank, the radiator, all of that kind of stuff is up front. So that was my basic direction, along with the grill, okay? And so at that point, I didn't know quite what I was going to do, but I started to sit down and think about it a little bit. And I thought, well, okay, 37 Ford. Wouldn't it be nice if we could do something that was kind of racy and cut away everything that didn't really need to be there for the front end. We're going to custom make the grill anyway. It'll look like a 37 Ford, but on this package, the car is going to be pretty small. I think he told me what the wheelbase was at the time, and it was 90-something inches, you know, real short, maybe 89, something like that. But anyway, this was the beginning of an idea for what we might try to do. And there is a front view also on this thing that will show you what it would look like front on. And I didn't show any of this stuff until much later to Jay, because I wanted a chance to think about it. And this goes hands in hand with Roger's presentation yesterday. You simply have to do things and let them gestate and sit and come back to them with a fresh eye. Sometimes it takes months, but it's well worth the time spent in doing that. This is Jay Eitel in 1941 with his chassis. Now, he wanted to make a little tiny race car out of this, okay? I think he had something like, they could have been Crosley hotshot rims on the thing, but he had his V860 there with the little carburetor and everything, and that's Jay then. I beg pardon?
He looks like a tall guy.
He's about my height, 5'10", 5'11". And in 2002, in his barn, quote unquote, here he is now with the chassis revised for wheelbase and tire size, and a good start on the formal chassis work that currently exists.
What's the rear axle?
What is the rear axle?
Yes.
I'll show you that as we go. I'll show you that. I'll show you that. You'll be tired of looking at it by the time I'm through.
Is this a revised chassis?
Yes, this is a longer wheelbase and larger wheels, and refined suspension. This guy is an engineer's engineer. He's a wonderful person because he is so fully rounded. He ran a company, he owned a company that did cherry picker adaptations for pickup trucks. So he knew everybody in Detroit because he bought Fords and Dodge and Chevy and GMC pickups. And he is about the only engineer I've seen who has a very good aesthetic eye, too. If it doesn't look right, it isn't right. If it isn't beautiful, I don't want any part of it. And he'll keep working until he gets it that way. I'm sorry?
Functional and pleasing.
Absolutely, yeah, sure. Now, you'll have to bear with me because I can only fit a given size into this projector here, but this was one of the first sketches that I did for this project. And it was a conventional Ford back end. You'll see that the rear fenders stop short of the sills and are cut away quite a bit, and that there's a room enough for a simple deck lid and engine underneath it and drive gear, and then the front end here. And from there, I went to the rear view and did a little more like so. And I thought that really as this was going on that, yeah, it's, the side is okay. I like the windshield with just the raw edge of glass on the top without any bright framework or anything. It's glass to glass in the center, common street rod practice. And then very simple, very lightweight castings for the A-pillars that don't even go up to the top of the glass to try and emphasize the lowness of the windshield. And all of that worked all right. But the back end, I wanted more sex, more spark to the thing, and I thought we needed to work a little more on that. So I thought about that a while and went ahead at least to a final front end proposal along with the rest of the, get it up, get it right side up, David, like so. And this is kind of the way the thing has ended up looking, really. And I'll detail the back end in the next shot. One thing that I want to do, let's see here, get this up as far as I can. One thing I want to do with the little Ford script that's on the rear quarter, that can be a part off of a 1940 Ford, the casting that has the red sidewalls and that has the Ford script on it, and the taper tail script that I'm developing would be another nameplate that would go right along with that, so we'd say Ford taper tail on the side. I will not call this car a hot rod. This is a special one-off, okay? Hot rod has other connotations, and this car is really a custom coach-built little GT car more than anything else. For the rear end, having looked at a lot of custom bodies in the 30s, down at the Auburn Court Duesenberg weekend, I always liked the Duesenberg taper tail Speedster, which is a very low back end on the thing like so. So I adapted that to the rest of the design of the car and thought that it was quite consistent and did about what I wanted it to do with the car. As it happens, these fenders are all bolt-on assemblies, and if he wanted to, he could go racing like so. And he liked that too at the time. You'll see these sketches are all dated November '93, so they're almost 10 years old now at this point. Well, for a while, this project was stillborn. He had too many other things to do. He was finishing up a 1965 Corvair, which he had bought brand new that he wanted to play with when he bought it. And he put a Jag V12 engine in the front and put all of the air conditioning and all of the ancillary accessories in the back so that when he was going down the road, all the whizzing and everything sounded like a Corvair coming out of the rear deck lid. And he could pull up next to a new Corvette after pulling out of the driveway and wipe him out. And his wife could take the car to the grocery store because it was an automatic transmission, and he just completely engineered and scratch-built all of this stuff himself to fit into this car. He also did a rego on his Marmon 16. He bought another engine and did a rego on the valve train with custom-made lifters and a much better oiling system. He said the oiling system and the valves are the weak point on the Marmon 16, and so he wanted to make that right, and he can now do a whole shot with this 2.5-ton Marmon, and he could go at least 100 miles an hour if he could find satisfactory tires to put on his rims, and that's the one thing that he has not been able to solve yet. But the car is a good driver. And it looks absolutely stock, but the engine is gold-plated inside, just completely re-engineered all the way. Well, those projects were working away, and I finally got a hold of him, and he said, I think I found a panel beater that will build a body for me in aluminum. And that got a start, but a very bad start. The panel beater was good, and certainly Mr. Eitel was a wonderful client to have, but the two just didn't seem to mesh very well. They were coming from different directions, and so he yanked the thing out of the shop when they had done virtually nothing but spend his money and started on a few of the panels but didn't get much of anywhere. He was discouraged at that point, and the project, just nothing happened for a couple of years, and I finally saw him up at the Monterey Historics Pebble Beach weekend about 2.5 years ago. And he said, I've decided to revive that project, Dave. He says, I've found a good panel beater, Steve Mole. That name may mean something to you up in the San Francisco area, so it's close by where he is. And they got off on the right foot. And at that point in time, I said, well, all right, I will generate for you a good 3-view drawing so that Mr. Mole can continue on the work that we began. And let's see here, I'll try and feed this through the correct way. This is done on a 10-inch grid. Come on, cooperate. And We didn't know how high Mr. Eitel was going to sit inside the car when I first did this drawing in the light lines there. The heavy lines show where we think now the top can come down on the thing. But this is the whole thing from front to rear, and the end view sections, half front and half rear over here. In this way, the panel beater or the client can build a wood buck, much as you used to build a bulkhead type scale model airplane, flying airplane back during World War II. And he can then use that buck, and it'll be a full size, it would be a full size one, to fit everything to, so that there's no air between the templates and the sheet metal that lays over it. And they work with an English wheel and a power hammer in order to form the aluminum to do this, and then butt weld everything together, planish the welds, and then go ahead and finish the whole thing. So it's a very labor intensive, but it's really the best way to build a real sheet metal automobile. Fiberglass to me always smells. I don't like it that well, you know. It's a cheap way of doing it, and you can get duplicates if you want to go into business, but this is a one-off, and Jay wanted it authentic as it would have been built in the 1937 era. To assist the panel beaters, I'll talk a lot more on how these drawings are developed in tomorrow afternoon's seminar, by the way, when we get into scratch building scale models. Okay, there's a lot of work involved in here. It's not that difficult to do once you understand the principles, but rather than lengthening this seminar, I'll leave it at that. If there's time when we get through, I can get into it if there are any questions on that. To assist the panel beaters a little more, they were having some problems in doing some of the grill area, and so I made this sketch so that he could understand a little more about what to do with the sheet metal and the grill surround and how the hood all fit, and the sheet metal was broken up into different pieces and so on. So now we go to Mr. Eitel's engineering and his shop. And this is his little V860. I hope you can we turn out some of these overhead lights? Or do they all turn down? Much better, much better, good, okay. You'll see he's got the fin cylinder heads. He's going to supercharge this job. He bought a little Mercedes SLK supercharger blower. You see it on the back of the engine there, supported by wood blocks. And he had custom made an intake plenum out of aluminum up on top of the engine there. I'm sorry for the focus, but this is the best we can do. And, excuse me? I beg pardon?
It's quite clear back here.
Okay, good. This is a new out-of-the-box, new old stock engine, by the way. And there's a front view here also that you can get a load of. That's going to curl up with the heat, but anyway. Excuse me?
Need to have a flat glass.
Well, there isn't one on the projector, unfortunately. Now, to intercool the supercharger, he's going to air condition it. A full air conditioning system built into it, and you can see the intercooler off to the side there now that everything is in the chassis. The circular ring that you see over the transaxle is a mounting which is unboltable over the top of the transaxle, and it houses the mini spare back there. But he can unbolt all of that so that he can do whatever trans work he needs to. There was an earlier question on what the rear axle was. Well, here it is. And he says, I think you might get a kick out of my transaxle center section, as it's a 1928 Model A Ford with Studebaker Spider gears, the 1940 Ford tranny turned 90 degrees to clear the shaft from the change gears, which are from an old Studebaker transmission. I think this is upside down. I thought I had it right, but it's you do it this way here. You can sort of get it. Anyway. Let me try one more time. Yeah. Sort of like that. Actually, the right-hand one is right side up and the other one is at right angles to you. But you can get an idea of what he has done in order to engineer a rear axle for this job.
So he's converting it over and then just rear suspension.
Oh yeah, yes, he has torsion bar rear suspension on it. You'll see that in some of the chassis shots that follow up.
Joints from the front of the Ford torque tube.
Yeah, it's a swing axle. Here are a couple more transaxle shots that might clarify a little bit more for you in the mounted position. He has machined out his own exhaust manifolds, which he has fabricated himself. And you can see he's starting to do the number 2 and the number 3 exhaust port tubes in the exhaust manifold here. This is all in a little shop big shop behind his house, by the way. And he has custom built mufflers of his own design to fit into the chassis. You can see he's rolling the screen work in the upper shot there, and they're finished more or less down in the lower end. He's made his own little die for the end pieces in the mufflers. And here they are in the mounted position in his chassis. Upside down. Hang on. Right here. Inside of the body. And that's the end of the taper tail body framing there. You'll see more of the body framing here as we go. This is a quick shot of the upside down of the radiator, custom made, in position with his front axles. His front axle is all independent suspension. He fabricated the die model for the A-frames and had them cast up in lightweight, and uses a Ford buggy spring transverse for the front suspension. I can't hear you?
Kind of like the old Jeeps.
Yeah. Well, we'll try and run this dude all in one here and see if we can't make sense out of this one. There are four shots on one sheet here. You can see that he has used Buick brake drums with the fins on them, which he liked a great deal. In the 3 shots in the lower 3/4 here. In the upper left is a shot of the steering gear, which goes right down almost to one side of the center. Well, it is on center. If my cord will last long enough, here I'll show you. You've got a steering box up here, where my shadow is on my finger, and it goes. There's a rod that goes straight forward, and then there is a bell crank. Steering goes down here, and then out to the tie rods on the side. And it's very direct acting. He said it works like a charm. But he did all of the pieces and everything all by himself in his shop.
Want a pointer?
No, yeah, okay, that might help. That might help, yeah, if it works. It's not working yet.
Yeah, you have to press the button.
Oh, press the button. Okay, good. Thanks. Technical problem. This will be some more on the front suspension here. Well, we've got the radiator tubing coming out of the bottom of the radiator here. It works around his steering arm here. And the die cast, or the cast, I should say, suspension member's upper, and the leaf spring is kind of behind here. You can't really see it a whole lot in through there. But very complex, very dense engineering. But this is kind of the way the guy thinks. Everything is very carefully thought out. As the pieces came along, yeah, he would look at what he had to do, and then he'd made a model for the A-frames, and got them cast up. And I have not seen any drawings that he has done, but I'm sure he has somewhere along the line. It's another shot of his spare tire mount. It goes in the back over the transaxle. And he made a little lightweight battery box which bolts in or unbolts. Hold the battery in the, I think this is in the rear quarter somewhere. It might be in the front. I can't remember where he located it for sure. This is the environment for the 12-gallon fuel tank. You see that they're a little bit along on the body here at this point with the shrouding behind the radiator core, all of that. And he spent a ton of time trying to get 12 gallons into the fuel tank, but this is the fuel tank on the floor here before its installation, all made out of aluminum and welded up. He does this all himself. He said, since I had my heart bypassed, he says, I can't just hold a torch up here and weld. He says, I have to rest my elbows on something. He says, I can get it done, but it's a little different but than before. In Steve Moll's shop, the body is starting to take form here. They've got most of the framing done in steel for the mounting of the sheet metal body. And there is a firm up in Washington State that builds repop stainless steel 37 Ford grills. And he flew up there especially to get one that was custom made so that it had the right center line to get the racy look that he wanted instead of the more vertical 37 Ford, and of course this is considerably lower also. But he flew up there, and they agreed on what was to be done, and then he got the grill shipped down here that you see in the car. I can't tell you the name for sure, but that sounds familiar. But he went up and spent a couple of days up there and talked to him on it. He said this was the best Rego on grills, and he didn't want to have to rework a stamped Ford grill. He thought this was a better route to take. This will show you the body framing from the rear three-quarter with the taper tail starting to take shape. And he had a mock-up engine and he had a real engine. I think this is the real engine that's in this one. The wheels are just whatever wheels at this point. They're the right size, but it was just something to get it up off the ground and be able to roll it around with. I should talk a little bit more about the wheels that he's going to use. Since he's got Buick brake drums, 1937 Ford wheels will not work. They have a big open spider in the center, a lot like the early Volkswagen Beetles. And I think they're a 6-bolt pattern anyway, and they won't work. So what he's going to do is to use 15-inch. He wanted 16, but he settled on 15 because of the availability. Magnesium rims, or alloy rims, and he'll cut out the spider in the center and turn out of a billet aluminum a spider that looks like a 37 Ford, except that it'll fit the Buick rim, or a bolt circle, and then he'll spin up some looking like 37 Ford wheel covers to go on that assembly. At this point, this is a side view of the door. You can see well, you can see where the engine is, so you know which way the car is pointed. It's a front hinge door. All of the hinges are in there, and it's an in-swinging door. It's not an out-swinging door. It doesn't need gooseneck hinges that take up a lot of invasive room on the inside. And this is the door inner on the far side of the car, with the shut faces in there, but there's no exterior skin on the door yet. Another view, same basic material, but oops, upside down, I'm sorry. Again, it's the far side, and you can see where that much of the construction is done. Got that all done before he got any of the exterior skin on there. This is the environment into which he will put the instrument panel. He's got a column shift lever. The shift mechanism goes by cables down around the what would normally be the firewall, and then through the middle, which will be a console effect or room in between the two seats, bucket seats that he'll have in there, and then the emergency brake pull is in the center. You can see that down below. And he has a cardboard mock-up that will show the instrument panel instrument locations, and he's bought some vintage Ford instrumentation, which he will fit in there. And I think he can get a look-alike tachometer in there. You can't see this, unfortunately, very well without... He's got two center-mounted instruments anyway, either side of the V in the panel. The V is that way because that's the way the windshield is going to be. He'll have a glove box on the right-hand side, and he's got a grouping of 4 instruments to the left of the tach and speedo. The dark circles you see are for ignition and a light switch. And then there are 2 more instruments on the right-hand side between the big instruments and the glove box. This is a shot he took just before he made his first run. He's got an ersatz radiator rigged up in the rear and all that, but everything is just sort of strapped onto the chassis, and he ran around the neighborhood making sure that everything was sorted out reasonably well before they really started hanging the body panels onto it. This is a shot in front of his house. Let's see here. There, that might be a little clearer with the hood and deck on there. And he said, you wouldn't believe after 41 years, this 85-year-old man still has to sit on a wooden box in order to get in his own car. We had bits and pieces of foam to work with to do just a rough approximation of the front fenders. Once the body really started to take shape in aluminum, and it's pretty obvious to him and somewhat to me that the stock Ford bezels are a bit too large. We're going to have to make some cut down versions somewhere to scale them down a little bit. They're a little bit bug-eyed, but it's a beginning for some of the fenders. What he's going to do from this point on, and they are not yet made, is a good wooden buck for the fenders, because the first phase of the body is pretty well done. Again, this is in front of his house, and you can see the aluminum has taken shape quite nicely on the car. The door skin is simply clamped into place. We have not really fitted a door skin to the door inner that already exists. But you can get a good idea. Excuse me?
What are the wheels in those pictures?
Those are off of a early Pontiac Tempest, and again, they're just for mock-up to make it look kind of nice at this point.
63.
Yeah, but he's going to have to go 15 for this one. I think he's going to use a reverse-looking rim on the rear and a little larger tire. He can get big and littles when he goes to the 15. When he goes to the 16, it's a little harder. And he doesn't want big drive and to use. It's not just a glass case show car at all.
Did you do the wooden bucks?
He will do those.
You did it.
There was no wooden buck made. There was no wooden buck made for the body. That was an eyeball job where they made the steel framing with him sort of in the background and my sketches hanging on the wall that you've seen here. And that's the way the body happened. I would have preferred they made a wooden buck for the body, but it came out damn well considering. And the fenders should be right on by the time we get done. He wants to make the buck for those. Because you see, until he finishes these custom-made wheels, he's not 100% sure where the track is. And where the track is very precisely has to be governed where the sheet metal comes down. Otherwise, you can get fenders that hang outside of the tires or inside of the tires, and we don't want this thing looking like a lowrider with the the wide tires on it.
How easy will it be to remove the fenders for if you want to run it fenderlessly? It doesn't take any time.
He's not. He says he's not going to do that anymore. But my guess is that if everything is bolts up the way we plan it to, I mean, you got to get under and unbolt the fenders. That's all. The body will be complete. I mean, it'll have side shields inside of the fenders that go all the way down essentially to where you'd want them to at the bottom of the frame for both front and rear. Well, this is an example of what you get into when you say you'd like to scratch design. I scratch design in order to find clients like this, and this is the only guy that I have found that has been this beautiful to work with and agreeable. He's flown me up to San Francisco a time or two to peruse what's going on. We talk on the phone all the time. It's been a wonderful, wonderful relationship. I can't say enough for it. I only hope he lives long enough to finish this thing. He's a young 85 years old.
How long have you been involved in the project?
With this project, from the get-go.
No, I mean, how long is that?
Well, the sketches started in November of '93.
93?
Yeah. Yeah, and it was stop-start, but for the last 2 years, it's been pretty steady, where he's been heavily involved, working, I would say, between 10 and 11 hours a day in his shop at getting things done, running around finding parts, and all that sort of thing.
You got it sort of weighs probably about 2,300 pounds, no more than that.
I have no idea what it's going to weigh. The only concern I really have is how is the car going to sit, and he's assured me that everything is adjustable enough to handle all of that with what he knows the car is going to weigh when it's done. That is a crucial point in the design of this kind of a thing, is to make sure that you're designing this thing in space and all of that, and you got all this equipment that's going to go onto a suspended chassis, and you want to know as closely as you can where this thing is going to sit when it's done.
On the rear axle, along with the torsion bars, are there also shock absorbers?
You bet.
Or is it transverse lead?
It's a transverse leaf, but I believe there are tubular shocks back there.
So it's torsion bar, leaf, and shocks?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Belts and suspenders.
Well, he's a thorough guy. Very.
What was that first drive like?
What was the first drive line?
Well, Mike,
What was it like when he just drove it for the first time?
I didn't ask him, but he told me, he said, I just took on the phone now. It was just a one-liner. He said, we got everything together. He said, I went for my first drive yesterday and worked great. He says, the steering is really nice. Everything seems to be good. He said, all I had to worry about was to make sure the radiator core didn't fall off the chassis the way we had it jacked up there. That's all. Well, I can't tell you how glad I've been to be able to talk to a talented group like this. We got a lot of talent at this meeting, in this room, all that sort of thing, and it's really wonderful to be among people who have interests like this. And I appreciate the opportunity to being able to discuss projects like this. There will be another slightly different oriented seminar that I'll be giving tomorrow afternoon around 4:30, something like that, in this room. And that'll be on scratch designing and scratch building and all that I go through anyway to do all of that. Anybody else, anything?
You aren't secretly building a model of this while he's doing
This is one design that I have not built a model of. It went straight from sketch to the real car. And maybe somebody here is interested enough to build me a model. I might build a model someday. I don't know. I don't think I could ever replicate all the engineering that he's got into this, running gear and the chassis and the build-up of the body and everything. I might build a curbside model just for my own satisfaction to have on the shelf or something like that someday.
Will he show this at any other shows and stuff? You know, it's like guys like me, you can't get out to like Concours and that.
He's located in Atherton, California, south of San Francisco, okay? And where do you live?
Right here.
Right here. Well, good luck. I don't know. I really don't know. You might be able to read about it in some publication. Hard to say. If you're really curious and you're ever in the San Francisco area, I can put you in contact with it.
I'd love to see what's finished.
His shop is something else. I mean, you know, he's got a ceiling that's twice as high as this. The floor area is about 6 times the size of this little room. And he's got a dyno and all kinds of parts up to the ceiling on metal racks and just all kinds of stuff. You know, everything. J-I-T-E-L, E-I-T-E-L.
I noticed you lost the French license plate when the tail tapered down, and on the drawing it was
Right.
Now off.
Number plate location for the rear. We're not going to put one on the front if we can help it. Number plate location is. I really debated a long time on whether we wanted to do a recess into the deck lid, and we might still do that, or we wanted to stick one up on 1937 style over the tail light. And we'll just have to see when we get all of the sheet metal fenders done what looks the best. Certainly it'll be easiest to stick one up there, you know. But how big a 6x12 number plate is going to look on this car is a question. Yeah, right, sure.
Oh yeah, there you
Say that again? I didn't get it.
make it retractable and have it pop up when the engine's on, and then when you shut the engine off, it retracts the deck lid.
You want to engineer that? It's okay by me.
It says on the stoplight on the top.
No,
That's one car that really benefit from those 39 Ford style teardrop tail lights.
yeah, right. They seem to me to be consistent, even though they aren't 37. That they would work well. We'll have to build a little land because the fender is crowned at that point, but you can do that.
I was curious about something about your design when you were doing the fenders.
Yes.
The particular peak to the fenders
Yes.
front and back reminds me a little bit of the 300 SL Mercedes Benzes. The side reveals on the 300 SLs, they have those peaks on
Yeah.
the front and back.
Yeah.
I was wondering if that came into your mind a little
No,
bit.
it did not. It's more typical 1930s coach-built French bodies and the 37 Ford has a vestige of the peak going down it anyway, so I just accented it more and then repeated it when I did the rear fender rather than having the fender just roll in.
Earlier drawings you showed us, it seemed very pronounced almost like this.
Well, if I have my way, that's what we'll do.
They look good. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, no, I think a peaked fender would go well in contrast with the smoothness of the body and all that sort of thing.
I'm sure when Mercedes-Benz did that, they were looking backwards into the 50s.
Say that again?
I'm sure that when Mercedes-Benz designed those on the 300, they were looking backwards.
I don't know. I don't know what entered their mind on that one. Can't tell you. Don't know.
Has he decided on, or have you guys decided on a color?
I have more or less. I don't know what their tastes really are. We've discussed it a little bit, and I said, well, you know, if there is any problem with the fit of anything anywhere on the car, you ought to go to a dark color to hide the joint lines, more or less, okay, as opposed to yellow or you know, that sort of thing. The one exception would be silver. A brilliant silver like Audi and Volkswagen currently have, I think would be nice, and his immediate response to that was, that'll sure make my wife happy. She likes it in aluminum. So I said, well, how do you feel? He said, well, the 37 Ford colors are all pretty mousy. Well, I sketched the original sketch in Washington blue, which is a 37 Ford color pretty much. And a dark blue or a midnight green would go well, and you could put a light pigskin interior in it, and it would look beautiful with it. Black is always classic.